A Real Pain might be my favorite movie of 2024. Well, second favorite movie because Dune Part 2 was a life-changing event, but outside of Sandworms and The Water of Life, Jesse Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin managed to pull off two of the best performances I've seen in a while. I know I'm late to the train on this one, and everyone has already raved about these two actors. I mean, one of them literally just won an Oscar almost a month ago as of recording this video, but after finally seeing this movie for myself, I just had to share my thoughts on what makes this movie such a heartwarming and heart-wrenching experience. So as always, this is a spoiler warning. If you want to watch A Real Pain without knowing anything about it like I did, then save this video, go watch the movie, and then come back to my review afterwards. Because I don't think I can properly talk about this movie without getting into the details of each character. And lastly, this is just my interpretation of the movie and our two main cousins. I think the film is open enough for people to have different opinions on each character, and especially the last scene. And so this is just my view of the movie, and if you had a different one, then let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear other opinions on this. But so starting off with this movie, we get a montage of Jesse Eisenberg, aka David, as he is frantically calling his cousin Benji as they get ready to meet at the airport. And after a billion empty voicemails to his cousin, David finally arrives at the airport to see that Benji has already been there for a few hours just kinda hanging out. So right away, we learn two key things that set the stage for the rest of the movie. First, we see that David is a very anxious and worrisome type of person. His mannerisms and obsessive voicemails let us know that this is someone who needs structure in his life or he'll feel very uncomfortable. On the other hand, Benji is the complete opposite. He's kind of just floating through life without any worries because he assumes that he'll figure it out as he goes. We see more of the contrast in their characters as they're in the airport and David is sharing his itinerary for their trip, which David needs because it tells him each step of the tour, whereas Benji waves it away and says he'll just follow the group wherever they go. And so on the surface, during the first part of this movie, you might think that David needs to chill out a little bit and go with the flow like his cousin, but there's clearly more going on between these two, and Benji's behavior is almost so chill that it's concerning. Like, there's a fine line between living a carefree life without any worries at all and not caring about anything because nothing matters anymore. And throughout the film, I think Benji kind of slides back and forth between those two roles. There's times where he's so jovial and innocent that he gets along with everyone he meets and lights up the room. But then there are other moments where Benji feels more cynical and like he's fed up with everything around him and pretending that it's all okay. He'll snap at the rest of the group and isolate himself from everyone on a whim. And so we get plenty of clues throughout the movie that there is more under the surface to Benji's carefree attitude. He is definitely dealing with some serious mental health issues, and that puts David's anxious behavior into a totally different light. David is almost like a concerned parent at times, just doing his best to be there for his cousin, but not having any of the social skills that would make connecting to Benji easier. I think that's what's so beautiful about the character interactions in this movie is that it feels like there's this huge gulf between David and Benji for so many different moments where you feel like they could never connect or relate to each other at all. Like, these two people couldn't be any more different from each other, and so there's no way that they can connect or relate to anything anymore. And yet scattered throughout the movie, we get these heartwarming scenes of bonding between them that feel like such an unexpected relief when compared to the previous scenes. Benji is such a complicated and complex character that is truly played to perfection by Kieran Culkin, because a less skilled actor or a less intentful script could have easily played this character as way more annoying or bothersome. He could have really gotten on your nerves, and don't get me wrong, Benji is a real pain in the ass in this movie, but he consistently brings you to the edge of being so fed up with him right before pulling you back in with something sweet and thoughtful. Like, Benji basically abandons David on their first day of the tour to go walk with the other members of the group. And so once they all stop for lunch, we see that David is halfway prepared to sit alone because he's expecting Benji will sit with the rest of the group rather than with him. But Benji walks right over to David and sits down like it was never even a question that he would have lunch with his cousin. And so we get so many scenes like this where you might think Benji is becoming too much trouble to put up with or intentionally being annoying, but you kind of notice that none of this behavior is on purpose, and that he's probably painfully aware of the negative effect he has on other people, In fact, I think Benji is probably more aware of his negative influence than the positives he brings. That moment where David tells Benji that he's able to light up a room before shitting on everyone inside of it is one of the most important moments of the film, because I think that Benji already knows this deep down. And I think Benji never asked to be the type of person who was responsible for making or breaking the mood. And that kind of social responsibility can weigh on someone in a way that David can never understand. Benji has highs and lows like anyone else. The difference is when Benji is feeling low, it brings this tidal wave that ruins it for everyone else in the room. Whereas David is never expected to carry that burden or impact a room in the way that Benji does. And so when you factor in that Benji is in a weird slump in his life when they make their trip to Poland, you can see how drastically his mood shifts impact the entire group, and how David, more than anyone else, is left feeling totally confused by these ups and downs. David explains that he wishes he could connect with people the way that Benji does. He says, "I love him, I hate him, and I want to be him." Because David is someone who struggles with interpersonal interactions and opening up to other people. He's not a social butterfly like Benji, and he can't insert himself into any group dynamic and make himself the highlight. David clearly has trouble with anxiety and is dealing with as much pain as anyone else in our story, and yet, as he says in this incredible monologue, his pain is unremarkable. He doesn't feel the need to burden anyone else with his pain, so he packs it up and keeps on moving. David has been able to numb the pain in his life and create something for himself with a family and a good paying job. Whereas Benji has been left behind, drowning in his pain and still searching for a purpose. There's an earlier scene where Benji is breaking down on the train, and he talks about how he used to comfort David when they were kids. He says that David used to cry so much and that Benji was the only one who would be there for him. And at that point in their lives, it was Benji who was the responsible one with everything figured out, and David was looking to him for help. But now as adults, everything is flipped and David has grown into this successful, responsible person, and it's Benji who hasn't grown up at all. And so this confusion and where they stand in their lives goes both ways, because Benji can't understand why he's been left behind and hasn't grown in the same way that David has, and David can't figure out how someone like Benji, who has this natural social gift that he would kill to have, is having such a difficult time finding a place in life. That dinner scene from Jesse Eisenberg is probably the best moment of his career, and it really puts the story into a nutshell, because both of these cousins are dealing with their own pains in a way that neither one of them could ever relate to. And despite it all, they're both doing their best to be there for each other while also driving each other to frustration at each attempt. And of course, everything is happening side by side with this tour of the Holocaust, which is a harrowing reminder of the pain that their ancestors went through just to get them to this point. And keeping in line with the theme of this movie, when David and Benji finally arrive at their grandmother's old house, they see that it's really just a house. It's nothing remarkable or impressive. There's no great release that happens for either one of them. Even their attempt at leaving a rock at her doorstep as a way to remember her is immediately ruined in the moment because someone else lives there now. The world has moved on. Even from something as horrific as the Holocaust, we have all moved on, and that pain is just a burden now to the new people who live at his grandmother's house. I mean, a literal burden, because they can't even leave the rocks on her doorstep because the new resident could trip on them. And so just like that, this trip that they've been waiting for their entire lives is over, and they're back in America, going back to their regular lives. And so the distance between these two cousins and the guilt, love, heartbreak that we see all throughout this entire movie, it all leads to probably the most heartfelt hug I've seen on screen outside of Good Will Hunting. And now I know the ending of this movie is very ambiguous and there's no definitive answer to what will happen to Benji, but I really like that because that's just life. Personally, I think Benji's mentality in this final scene is that he's going to keep on trying, that this trip and his final hug with David is enough reason for him to push forward and give himself another chance at life. That doesn't mean that he'll be successful or that everything has been solved in 1 week. I think that's kind of the point of this movie, is that nothing gets solved overnight and we have to manage our pain and keep moving forward. But clearly, Benji entered this trip with the thought that David had moved on and no longer cared about him. But now leaving the trip, he understands just how much David still cares about him with that slap to the face, and maybe these two cousins haven't grown as far apart as we thought. So I think it's a hopeful ending, even if it isn't the stereotypical happy ending. It's a more grounded way to tell this story because, as dark as this sounds, there is no end to the pain. Life is always going to challenge you, and there's no final mission or trip that will complete you and bring those challenges to an end. Working on yourself is a lifelong commitment, and I'd like to think that Benji in this final scene has decided to recommit himself to that at the end of the movie. But that's just my thoughts on the characters. Outside of that, I mean, obviously, this film is incredibly well done overall. There's a beautiful score with great cinematography and performances all around. But the center of everything is the relationship between these two cousins. And for that, it's one of my favorite movies I've seen in a very long time. So if you enjoyed this video, then please drop a like and hit the subscribe button. Those two things really help me out, and I appreciate it so much. If you've seen A Real Pain and have thoughts you want to add to anything I said, then please leave a comment so I can see your takes. And with all that said, I'll see you next time.